Hey everyone, it's the Friday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Brian Batko. We're going to talk about this curse that has just been over the Steelers about never winning in Philly since 1965. But could the man who's never lost to Philly and Russell Wilson break that curse? On Friday the 13th, we discuss all that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by one of our great Steelers beat writers, Brian Batko. And as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as our daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, as I said at the top of the show here, the Steelers go to a place where they have not won since 1965. A lot of people have talked about that. But as Russell Wilson was put to it in his presser on Thursday, he's never lost to the Eagles. In fact, he's 6-0 as a starter against the Eagles. 4 of those wins have come in Philadelphia, including a playoff win where he's in total thrown 9 touchdowns to 1 interception. Pretty good numbers there for him there. But Brian, what do you see as the big factor that if the Steelers are going to break the curse here in Philadelphia and do something that hasn't been done since before the Chuck Noll days, what do they have to do in this game?
The Philly curse Friday the 13th thing, were you planning on using that, or
Absolutely.
was that just off the top of the head?
No, I've used it like 3 times this week.
Okay, gotcha. Also, we're just not going to talk about a Marvel arcade game being behind you now, Chris. Like,
all right, I'm redesigning my setup here. I got these things here. I'm trying to hang them on my wall, but I'm trying to position them in the right spot with my camera, and I needed to put this somewhere, so this is here for now. Yeah, I loved Marvel vs. Capcom back in the day, so that's just here for now as display.
You didn't think I was going to notice that and be like,
no, I didn't think you'd notice that. I was hoping that you would just
game behind you for the first. I was like, am I losing?
It's very
my
small,
mind?
Actually. This is like it just like sits on the desk.
I see it. It's like a desktop thing. I thought it was like a whole.
No.
Either way, though, that's pretty sweet.
Thank you.
I thought you were worried I was going to get pretty boring and you were just going to turn around and
it's just I could just turn on this game right here.
Yeah, I start beating up Daredevil or something. But all right, well. So, yeah, I think sometimes these conversations, like, I don't always love it because what did the 1965 Steelers have to do with the 2024 Steelers? I mean, really,
agreed,
really nothing. And they're actually one of the franchises that could make more of an argument for that than others because they have had the same ownership and family involved for so long. But I do think there can be times where players start to hear about these long streaks from us throughout the week. Media are talking about it. Maybe fans are talking about it, or even friends and family, if they've been kind of paying attention to some of the stats and numbers surrounding the game. And maybe that can get in your head a little bit. But I think more so than anything, it's number one, it's probably coincidence to some extent. You know, like I think when Arthur Smith was asked about it, or maybe it was Terrell Austin, it was they wisely pointed out, like, they just don't play them that often. I mean, you're not going to have a streak like that against the Browns or the Ravens or the Bengals one way or the other for the most part, because you play them so much that things are going to just change. They're going to be cycles that you go through, and you're going to have more opportunities to break those cycles. Yeah, for whatever reason, going to Philly has not been kind to them. Obviously, it is a tough place to play for any team, not just the Steelers from the other side of the state. Yeah, they've I guess, been up at times when the Steelers have been down when you look at that game a couple years ago, but they've been up at times when the Steelers have been up, and they've absorbed their best shot and given it right back to them. So I don't think there's anything mystical about it, but right now the Eagles are a team that's roster construction near the top of the league. They've found their guy at quarterback and invested in him. They've made some shrewd moves to get veterans like A.J. Brown. They've drafted and they've developed. So that's not going to make it any easier to get that first W on the ledger since 1965. But yeah, Russ undefeated in, again, a similar kind of thing. It's like I went back and looked at those games. A few times he beat good Eagles teams. Other times he beat pretty bad Eagles teams. We know they've been an organization that, unlike the Steelers, has been more willing to kind of ride the roller coaster, bottom out at times to try to bounce back up. And they've done a good job of that. They've played in Super Bowls more recently. But some of those games, Russ hasn't been so prolific. He was with all those wins were with Seattle. We know how good those Seahawks teams were defensively. Legion of Boom, turn around, hand the ball off to Marshawn Lynch, and watch him just run dudes over. So something's got to give here. The weird Steelers streak or the very impressive Russell Wilson streak in the city where they throw snowballs and boo Santa Claus.
It is a crazy place. It's also fair to point out for the Steelers, they also have a pretty good hold over the Eagles at home, whereas it's not as long as 1965. The Eagles have never won at Acrisure Stadium / Heinz Field. The last time they won, in fact, was the last year of Three River Stadium in 2000. So the Steelers and Eagles, they've been trading off whoever basically hosts wins. But you look back at how some of these games.
I remember that 2000 game. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was a dude named Stanley Pritchett was part of a humongous comeback for the Eagles. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, they needed at the end of the game, they needed an onside kick. They went off sides on the onside kick, and it was called the first time, and then it was called a second time, and they basically kept doing it until they got it right. And then the third time they get the onside kick, Hines Ward points out to the officials, hey, after the second time, it's our ball. Like, they can't keep doing that until they get it right. And the NFL issued the Steelers an apology because the Eagles won that game after that third onside kick attempt where they didn't get called for offsides. That was I do remember that game. As
the Steelers were up 23-13 with 3:42 left. My grandma and I would never leave early, but we left early that day, and the rest was history. The Eagles came back and won. Yeah, it could have been my fault. I've been I've been jinxing the Steelers going back to when I was 9 years old.
But to the point of this matchup, I think one thing the Steelers have in this game, and we'll talk more about this matchup as we go throughout this show. I've called it all week the Andy Weidel Bowl. You and Ray talked about that after talking to the coordinators on Thursday. But these are two teams that are building to be more physical up front for this new age of where the NFL is going. Less about the passing game, more about running and defense. And the Eagles definitely have an edge on the side of they've been doing it for a little bit longer because Andy Weidel was with them first, and they kind of, he's been helping them get there. And so their offensive line's more seasoned. They're more put together. They have more cohesion. Their defensive front has, some young goons that are developing, and Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and, Nolan Smith. And I'm just naming the Georgia guys at this point. But at the same time, the Steelers have their own end. And I think the one thing the Steelers might have on their end, and go back to Russell Wilson, is a guy who can kind of work around what defenses are doing. Like, you look at his numbers here, he never lit up the Eagles in any of these games. Like, his best game was 20 of 31 for 227 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions in a 24-10 win back in 2017. But all these other games, 1 touchdown, two touchdowns. He's only ever thrown 1 interceptions. But I think the most yards he ever threw for was 272. No, he did throw for 325 in the playoffs. But again, 1 touchdown in a 17-9 win. But I think that's who Russell Wilson is. You look at last week. Russell Wilson didn't light up the Browns, but he made the key plays in the key moments. And I think that's where, if they're going to win this game, it's going to come down to him doing that, and doing that without George Pickens, because we know he's not playing in this game. And I think that's going to be a big key here, is can he engineer those types of plays with Pat Freiermuth, Mike Williams, Scotty Miller, Calvin Austin, Darnell Washington, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. That crew has to be the playmakers that he works with this time.
Yeah, and it'll be really intriguing to see if this group of Steelers can close ranks without George Pickens, rise to the occasion, because regardless of whether they care much about what a million teams before them did against the Eagles and not being able to win out there, I think there is something about psyching yourself up for, they know the Eagles are on a 9-game win streak. They know they're 11-2 and considered a Super Bowl contender, one of the best teams in the league. And if you're a Najee Harris or Pat Freiermuth or one of these guys, Dan Moore, who was on this team a couple years ago, when you went out there and just got embarrassed, outclassed for 60 minutes of football time, do you come in with some demons from that day, or do you think like, okay, no, we're different. We're about to show the world that we're not that team from 2022. In fact, Chris, there are so many moments from that 2022 game that make me think like, okay, Andy Weidel and Omar Khan must have been sitting there that day saying, all right, we need better corner play. Let's go draft the Joey Porter Jr. The next year. We need to get stronger up front. I guess at that point they're thinking, okay, we need to develop Kenny Pickett more. Well, that ended up going out the window. And I kind of wrote about that for my Sunday story in the Post-Gazette if people want to check it out. Just things coming full circle with the Steelers going out there with Russell Wilson to Philly, where Kenny will be standing on the other sideline. I sort of compared him to are you a It's a Wonderful Life fan, Chris?
I do like It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, I compared him to like a bizarro George Bailey, where he's kind of seeing what life would have been like without him, except we know he's not probably going to get the happy ending. And it is a wonderful life right now for the Steelers and Russell Wilson. So
absolutely.
A lot of good stuff to this one.
We'll talk more about this matchup as we get to our predictions here, but we got to get to our pick six as far as we look at other 6 games. There's a lot of big games this weekend, Brian, as we're getting closer to the playoffs. The buys are done, so lots of action to go over. We'll go over all that action here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko, stick with us here. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko, talking all things Steelers. But we zoom out now and we look at a big week in the NFL. It's week 15, which means we got 4 more weeks of regular season football, and then the playoffs are started. So there's a lot of games that are in the way of shaping the playoffs. So let's get into where some of those games here and where they stand. This first one actually has, I think, big consequences with it based on the result. That's the Dolphins at the Texans. The Texans are 2.5-point favorites in this matchup. The Texans sit at 8-5, leading the AFC South here. But also the Dolphins are 6-7, 2 games back of them in the wild card spot, tied with the Colts for the 8th spot right now in the wild card race. They're both 2 games behind. What's crazy enough, a logjam of 4 teams: the Texans, Ravens, Chargers, and Broncos, all sitting at 8-5. If the Dolphins want to get their surge on and get back to being a playoff team like they were last year, they've certainly given themselves a shot winning 3 of their last 4. Granted, they started off 2-6 on the year, so they need a big rebound. If they're going to get in the playoff race, Brian, they got to win this game. Unfortunately for them, I think Houston takes this one at home. What say you?
All right, full disclosure, I let my 4-year-old pick all the games on my Yahoo app this week while he was sitting on my lap. So I'm going to just try to reverse engineer my takes based on what he went with here. And he went with the Dolphins +3. I'll actually pick them straight up. The Texans barely pulled one out against the Jags before their bye, and then they lost to the Titans the week before that. So they're in something of a rut. And we know the Dolphins are soft, but they get to play at NRG Stadium indoors in the Dome in this one. So maybe their softness won't matter as much, and they can put up some points. Give me Miami on the road in an upset.
All right, we split on the first one here. Let's talk about another game here. This one, not as much about a team trying to make the playoffs. This one's about the Chiefs trying to hold on to that 1 seed. They are 4.5-point road favorites at the Cleveland Browns here. But the Browns, there's been some people trying to pipe this up as the sleeper game of the week because the Browns can be tricky. Their defense is tough. They're playing in Cleveland. Jameis Winston can always be good for a crazy game. They just lost last week. Maybe they bounce back this week. I'm sorry, though. I know that Steelers fans probably want the Browns to come through for them one time. I don't think it happens this week. I think the Chiefs, they've been winning in all sorts of weird ways. They'll find another way to win this one this week. Give me the Chiefs. Though I do think the Browns cover. This is a field goal game.
I mean, Myles Garrett must have whooping cough or cholera or typhoid fever or something based on what they showed on Hard Knocks. So I just don't know that he's going to be able to muster up even the lung capacity to go out there and try to help the Browns pull this one off in Cleveland. I like that my son Dawson went with the Chiefs in this one. He must be a fan of Len Dawson. franchise legend, smoking a heater after the game.
Pittsburgh, right?
What's that?
He's from Western PA, right?
I don't think he was from here. I think he began his career with the Steelers.
That's right. He started with the Steelers.
Yeah, he's from Alliance, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Which is somewhere in Eastern Ohio, I think. So, yeah, I mean, not too far. But, all right, yeah. Bottom line, I'm taking the Chiefs as well.
All right, we move right along down the list of games here. Another big game in the wild card matchup, and probably an even bigger one in the wild card matchup. It is the Colts at the Broncos. The Broncos are 3.5-point favorites at home right now. You look at this matchup. The Broncos, they're sitting 8-5. They are the 7th seed because of the tiebreakers right now between the Chargers, Ravens, and Broncos. All sitting there 8-5. Of course, the Texans are 8-5, but they're in a much worse division because they're the AFC South. And the Colts are sitting there at 6-7. Like the Dolphins, the Colts need to win this game to stay in the race. If either one of those teams lose this game, you're going to be asking to come back from 3 games in 3 weeks, and that's just. That is asking a lot here. You might end up with a solidified at least 17. You know which 7 teams will be making the AFC playoffs by next week if things go this way. But I think they do go that way. I like the way the Broncos are playing on defense and offense. Give me Denver winning at home here, Brian.
Yeah, the Colts are another well-rested team. They got their bye last week. The week before that, they played the Patriots and barely won. So I kind of momentarily think I forgot the Indianapolis Colts even exist in this universe. But I will not be picking them to go on the road and beat a Broncos team that has everything kind of figured out right now, I think. So while I'm going to keep the Dolphins' surge potential alive with that pick, I think the Colts can pretty much wrap up the 2024 season like a gift, put it under the tree, put a bow on it after losing to the Broncos this weekend.
Another team that 2 other teams that are in a tight playoff race. The Chargers are 3-point favorites. 3-point favorites over the Buccaneers. The Chargers are at home. The Chargers, one of those other 8-5 teams I talked about in the AFC, trying to hold on. If they were to lose and the Colts or Dolphins would win, that'd become a big question over the next 3 weeks. The Buccaneers, meanwhile, they are holding on to the division lead at 7-6 in the NFC South, but right behind them are the Atlanta Falcons at 6-7. And crazy enough, the 5-8. New Orleans Saints aren't out of the playoff picture yet. Heck, the NFC South is so bad. The 3-10 Carolina Panthers are not officially eliminated yet from the playoff from winning the division. So that's how bad things are there. But all that being said, give me the Chargers. I like their defense. I like the way that they put I think they'll be a more balanced team in this one, though I could see the Buccaneers making some big plays. What say you?
I don't love that Justin Herbert's banged up again, ankle/thigh. We saw that he was less than himself week 3. When he was going through that, lost to the Steelers. But I think this Chargers team is resourceful. Yeah. And whether they have to get it done on the ground or come up with some sort of game plan to skirt around a less mobile Herbert, they'll find a way to beat Baker Mayfield and the Bucs in their house at SoFi Stadium. Although, do the Chargers even have much of a home field advantage?
Yeah,
if they don't, I don't necessarily think the Bucs fans would be the people to take it over. So, yeah, I'll go with LA at home.
This is probably the game of the week for everyone. There's a lot of people saying a Super Bowl preview here. Bills at Lions. Lions are 2.5-point favorites at home. Lions been dealing with plenty of their own injuries. Their secondary has been really banged up. The Bills have been rolling of late. I think it's going to be interesting, though. They lost last week to the Rams. I think it's going to be interesting. Some people subscribe to the thought that the Bills need to lose one game before the playoffs so that they can get that one loss out of their system. They haven't lost since week 2 against the Buccaneers. They've been winning relentlessly. But granted, their last couple have been close. They won against the Bears by 3. They won against the Packers by 3. The Lions did. And so now the Bills, they coming off this loss to the Rams. I've been going back and forth about this game all week. But I do think the Lions are a better overall team. I think that Josh Allen is phenomenal, and he's put himself as an MVP candidate next to Saquon Barkley. But I think the Lions can still put together a better total effort. And at home at Ford Field, I think they find a way to get it done and get the win.
Yeah, I got to thank the Bills for making me look smart last week by picking the Rams as my upset special. I'm glad they did flub it so that I could get one upset pick to my name. I'm going to go with the Lions in this one. Again, kid picked them. He loves the Lions for some reason. I guess a lot of kids like Lions.
Yeah, that's a cool name.
Really care less or know what a Bill even is.
right?
But yeah, I just think they are on a roll right now. And Dan Campbell doesn't seem like one of those coaches who's going to let his foot off the gas. I think he'd just as happily say, nope, we want to win every single game from now until the end of time. 2025 Super Bowl is on that route, and we just want to beat everybody always. And he's got, at least for now, this might change this offseason when the head coaching carousel starts to spin, but he's got the coordinators to do that with Ben Johnson on the offensive side of the ball, Aaron Glenn on the defensive side of the ball, with Bill Belichick off the Chapel Hill. I would think those two guys are right at the top in line for a head coaching job this cycle, and maybe Mike Vrabel wiggles his way in there as well after this year in football Siberia as a Browns consultant or whatever he's called.
No, but that's the thing. I do agree. Those coordinators, they both have done spectacular jobs. Aaron Glenn, the Lions defense has been a very good unit, and they've been without Aiden Hutchinson, who was on a defensive player of the year pace before he was hurt. And I think it was 5 weeks in, he was leading the league in sacks. I think that you're right about both those coordinators. But again, that's why I'm picking the Lions here. I think they are a better overall team. They were my Super Bowl pick to start the year. They're still my Super Bowl pick right now because they're playing some really good football. Last game we're going to
be rocking. Ford Field should be rocking for that.
It should be. This is a huge game. And also, like, if this was the Super Bowl, I think like this would be the Super Bowl America could get behind. Two franchises that have never done it before. Both have been heartbroken time and time again. You're going to feel so happy for some city that's never gotten a chance to hold up a Super Bowl trophy.
That's what I was pulling for that one last year, and then we got
the complete opposite.
49ers again. Don't remind me. All right, next game. What are we finishing up with here?
Last game before we get to Steelers, Eagles, Packers at Seahawks. This is also an important game for the playoffs. You look at how these teams sit right now. The Packers, crazy enough, they are a really good football team, but they're third in their division. Why? Because they're in the NFC North. The Packers are 9-4 behind the 11-2 Vikings and, of course, the 12-1 Lions. They're still holding on to their sixth seed, though, in the playoffs. Right behind them, though, the Commanders at 8-5. The Rams, with their win on Thursday Night Football, are 8-6. They shouldn't be put behind here. But the Seahawks, they hold on to the NFC West crown right now, 8-5. But again, that right behind them are those Rams at 8-6. A loss here would make that very interesting there. But give me the Packers. I like Jordan Love. I like the balance on their team. Their defense has been doing it a lot for me this year. I'm going to take the Packers winning on the road as the road favorites here in Seattle.
Yeah, I also like the Packers. I feel like they're in a mode right now where, like, when they just see a team other than the Lions or the Vikings, they're like, all right,
we got this.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, we see the Vikings or the Lions. We know we're in for a dogfight, but we get anybody else, and it's like, yeah, we're going to whip you up real quick because you're not our kryptonite. So, yeah, I think the Packers go into Seattle, and it just feels like a game where the Seahawks are playing better. I think they probably find their way into the postseason, which would be awesome for first-year coach Mike McDonald. But I think in a big game, Matt LaFleur, who's one of the best play callers out there, might put him in a little bit of a vice grip in this one.
All right, there's our pick six. We get back to Steelers, Eagles, and our key matchups here next on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you the show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website at moonhonda.com to get your new vehicle. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
It's that time of year again to get the Honda of your dreams during Happy Honda Days, where you'll find great offers on a sporty new Civic, spirited Accord, fun to drive HRV, and versatile CRV. So don't wait. Turn your holiday dreams into reality with a new Honda named KBB.com's best value brand. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Let's get to the Steelers-Eagles matchup. Brian, the Eagles are 5.5-point favorites at home, so it's clear Vegas is feeling the whole Eagles vibe there. The money line is -240 for the Eagles, +198 for the Steelers. Over under is set at 42.5, so low scoring affair, maybe in the low 20s. Well, I guess not low scoring, but medium scoring affair, with both teams maybe getting into low 20s or someone in the high teens and the low 20s there. What is we talked about this matchup. We talked about things that are important here. If the Steelers are going to pull off this upset on the road, what's the biggest thing that has to happen in your mind?
Yeah, I think controlling the line of scrimmage. You can't really let Saquon Barkley just dominate this game. I think with the tenor of the Eagles situation right now, I would want to put it on Jalen Hurts and see if he and A.J. Brown can get right after some of the turmoil that's going between them. Try to make them one-dimensional if you can. Yeah. Easier said than done with the way the Eagles are running the ball. But, I think T.J. Watt, Alex Highsmith are one of the few groups of edge rushers in the NFL who can go toe-to-toe with Jordan Mailata and Lane Jackson as tackles on an island. So, I look at that as kind of the first step for the Steelers is don't let them run all over you. Put them in a situation where they do have to prove their passing attack can take a step forward. And then maybe you let your leaky but opportunistic secondary potentially make some plays. Now, we'll have to monitor Deshaun Elliott. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. Be heading down to the facility shortly after I slam my laptop shut here with you, Chris, to see what's going on with him. And also Larry Ogunjobi up front dealing with a groin. I feel like that's never good, especially for a 300-pound defensive lineman to try to work with that. So I guess it'd be worse if he was a skill position guy and he's making quick lateral cuts. But either way, he hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday either. So 2 key injuries on the Steelers defense, while the Eagles actually have a pretty clean bill of health going into this game.
I think that's another thing here is that the Eagles are not banged up. They're at home. They are that gives them a bit of an edge here. But this is, again, like you said, like the trenches are very important. This is also where both of these teams like to live, right? Like, if you look on when the Steelers have the ball, they right now have the number 9 rushing offense in the NFL. The Eagles have the number 8 rushing defense in the NFL. On the flip side, when the Eagles have the ball, the Eagles have the number one rushing offense in the NFL. The Steelers have the number 4 rushing defense in the NFL as far as yards per game allowed. And I think that's going to be a big tale of this game is who gets to dictate what there. The Steelers, like you and Ray were talking about on Thursday, I don't think it's going to be about limiting Saquon Barkley to 6 yards and 15 carries like they did 4 years ago when he was with the Giants. And as Mike Tomlin acknowledged, this is a completely different team. There's a lot of
I love how many people are tweeting out the stats of like, look at Saquon Barkley's career stats against the Steelers as if he's played like 6 games against them.
Right.
Like, guys, exactly. it was one game with a
4 year. It was the first game of COVID
team. Too. Yeah. I'm like, what are we doing here? I mean, you talk about small sample sizes. Geez. I mean, the most accurate and, not disingenuous way to frame that is the Steelers have faced Saquon Barkley once and bottled him up when he was with the Giants. So.
And again, that was when Daniel Jones, not Jalen Hurts, was his quarterback. That's when he didn't have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and one of the best offensive lines in football in front of him back when he was with the Giants. And so that's the difference here. But
every time the Steelers face Saquon Barkley, Cam Hayward gets an interception. So ipso facto.
He joked about he needed a game ball for every time he gets an interception. So that's actually kind of funny that you bring that up. But to my point here, they're not going to shut him down like that. If they limit him, it's probably going to be like get him. If he gets his 20 carries, he's limited to like 75, 80 yards, maybe 90. Keep him from taking over the game. Like he's going to get his. Just don't let him getting big. Don't let his good play turn into big plays that tilt things in the Eagles' favor. Make them have to win, like you said, with Jalen Hurts, showing you that him and A.J. Brown are cool. And for those who aren't familiar with that, basically A.J. Brown criticized the passing game after their last game. The Eagles actually, here's the crazy part, they ranked first in rushing offense, next to last in passing offense in the NFL right now. And A.J. Brown said they had to improve the pass game. Then Brandon Graham, the longest tenured Eagle on the team, even though he's on injury reserve, went on his radio show and said that there's beef between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. Then he said, he recanted. I shouldn't have spoke on that. And then the Eagles have been trying to patch it up since. It's been some mess there. It's been some drama, some things that, Steelers fans are like, hey, wait, that's happening somewhere else. Yes, it happens in other places that there's sometimes some banter that gets out there. But I think that's the thing, like you said, They gotta make them prove, hey, you can win with this passing game that you don't like to win with right now. For whatever reason, you have these big names that have been superstar players in the NFL that you got to the Super Bowl with those guys a few years ago. You're gonna have to win with them, not with Saquon Barkley. So I agree, winning there is gonna be important. On the flip side, try to win with your trenches, but Russell Wilson has to be ready for when the Eagles are playing the run aggressively to get hitting those moon balls down the sideline, catching those young corners in spots where, like, hey, maybe I can catch them here, maybe I can get them off here. And then if they get a shot up the middle, you got to get the ball to Pat Freiermuth, you got to get the ball to Calvin Austin on some of those seam routes, get some of those explosive plays to open up things in the Steelers offense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think the Eagles are probably sitting there like, all right, you want to take your chances on 50-50 balls with Mike Williams and Van Jefferson against Darius Slay and Quinyon Mitchell. Be our guest. We feel we're going to stand on that. We think we're going to win more of those than we lose. But yeah, that's where I think the advantage might be for the Steelers. Down the seam, Pat Freiermuth getting heavily involved. Maybe dust off old Darnell Washington for a week. Try to just get a little bit more creative with what you're doing. If you're Arthur Smith, I think he's looking forward to this, and this is going to be a big opportunity for him. We talked a lot on the previous week's show about potentially positioning himself as an NFL head coach again. If he goes to Philly, beats this Eagles defense with the Steelers offense missing George Pickens, that's going to be a resume bullet point this offseason for him and really just going forward. So I think he's maybe going to show us some different things, try to break some tendencies. It's not going to be as simple as George is down there somewhere, throw it up to him, which I personally always think is a pretty good strategy, but not unwise to use that strategy. Don't overthink it sometimes, like Matt Canada did when he was here. But maybe they should break out Canada's old wide receiver reverse touchdown pass to the fullback play that Chase Claypool hit Derek Watt on a couple years ago.
I forgot all about that play. Jeez,
he went nuts in the press box. Remember that?
I mean, it was a beautiful trick play. It was just like one of the.
It was pretty sweet. It was the flip side of the Pickett to Pickens touchdown against the Ravens to win it, where everyone's like, "Why wasn't he reacting?" No, on that one, he was like, "You thought the Steelers just won the Super Bowl with Claypool to Watt." So, Steelers are going to have to, either get some otherworldly play from guys who haven't been in those roles, or do things a little bit differently this week. And goes without saying, as you mentioned, Chris, if you can just gash them with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren on the ground, do that until they stop you. But I think the Eagles are going to be geared up for that as well.
It's going to take a balanced attack. All right, let's get to our predictions here. How do you see the pace of this playing game going? What's your X factor moment? And then score.
I think the Steelers are going to want to shorten this game. Why wouldn't you? Without George Pickens, you don't have one of your biggest swords. They've got pretty much all of theirs, and they're a really good team to begin with. I would want to limit the possessions. I'd want to try to get out of there, quickly if I can, and just condense this game so that you keep AJ Brown off the field, keep Saquon off the field, possess the ball. I don't always think that's the right strategy, and I think the Steelers don't always have to go in with that mode now the way Russell Wilson's been playing this season. But this is a week where I think, Tomlin, get back to your old black Air Force One ways and try to pull this one out. And for some reason, Chris, I mean, I look at all the X's and O's, the matchups, the individual personnel here. There aren't many holes in the Eagles roster, but I just feel like something quirky is going to happen, and it's going to be a wonky game. And I don't like the friction and the tension right now in Philly. It almost seems like they need to lose one and then kind of have a come to Jesus moment with each other, and then they can set the table for the stretch run. I'm going Steelers 17, Eagles 14.
Whoa.
Jake Elliott might miss a field goal or two as well. The Steelers have been getting bailed out by some key misses by Justin Tucker and Dustin Hopkins their last couple, two of their last couple victories.
They certainly have, and they've been able to rely on the toe of Chris Boswell to win a lot of games. Yeah. That's a very interesting point. And to your point about time of possession, the Steelers are the #1 team in time of possession right now in the NFL. They average almost 32 and a half minutes of possession per game. The Eagles, though, #4, not too far behind them. But crazy enough, and this is a weird stat because normally it doesn't work this way, but the Steelers average more time, have a higher time of possession when they're away than they are at home. They've been able to possess the football even better, 33 minutes and 19 seconds per game when they've been away. Also, that's also the best in the NFL when you look at that mark there. So with that being said, looking at this game and how this plays out, I also think that the Steelers try to come up with a balanced attack. They'll try to catch you where you're not. I just think that when I look at this, Russell Wilson, his 6-0, the Eagles, they're whatever and 0, when they host the Steelers, that somebody's O has got to go. And I think it's going to be Russell Wilson's. I think the Eagles are a balanced team right now. It's a tough team to beat. It's a tough place to win. And if George Pickens was in this game and Deshaun Elliott was healthy, I think, oh, there goes my AirPod. Look, I think that's God trying to tell me something right there. But if George Pickens was in this game and Deshaun Elliott was in this game for sure, and he still might be, we got to see what happens on the Friday practice. But if those things are happening, maybe I'd take the Steelers. Maybe. But without them, I'm sorry, I can't. I think it's still a close one. I think it goes down to the wire. But give me the Eagles winning 23-17 in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I already regret my pick, but I just have a weird feeling in my gut for some reason about this game, and we'll see Sunday around 7:30 if I'm right.
Absolutely. He's Brian Batko, him, Jerry Dulac, Ray Fittipaldo. They'll be in Philly covering that game. I'll be here in Pittsburgh, working the podcast studios and such.
My over-under on cheesesteaks consumed this week is 3.5.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go with the over because you love some cheesesteaks. I can see that happening.
Yeah, they might even have like kind of a sort of pared down version in the press box, but that would count.
Absolutely. He's Brian Batko. I'm Chris Carter. Read all of our work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find us here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as well as all of our daily content that comes out here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all those episodes. Keep it here Sunday night after that game to get all our Steelers-Eagles reactions right here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.